go for it then.
Okay.
Okay. Well, firstly, thanks for allowing us to come down and chat to you really, and so on behalf of TWR, our thanks to you, for that.
Well,
and,
it's all in a day's work for international rescue.
So the object of this really is we've started now looking at a series of sort of interviews with people to look at sort of the let's get technical. That's kind of the topic of our chat really, and it's first to kind of look at sort of the technical aspect rather than say just looking at reviewing an album or reviewing something, but actually looking at how does it actually come together really. And for me, as a sort of, as you know, we're a relatively new keyboard person, is kind of looking at how does that take place, how does that happen, what happened there, what happened, or what did you use, why did you use that. So basically, hopefully Nick, you will be as honest and take as long as you like.
Out of my memory, it's amazing that there are huge chunks of all of that past. I mean, because bear in mind that a lot of it is up to 35 years ago, or even actually 35, 36, 37, 38 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, Spectral Mornings, 38 years ago. That's incredible. But there's huge chunks that I can remember very, very clearly, and yet there's other bits which just mysteriously disappear. So,
well, let's see how good your memory really is.
It's going to be potluck as to which bits you get.
Yeah. Okay. So, always as I say, I'd like to go right back to the very beginning. Yeah.
A very good place to start.
Certainly. And the reason for that, because I've started learning keyboards, but I've done it within the last 5 years, whereas obviously you knew it's a bit longer than that. So would you like to take us right back to the beginning? How did keyboards start for you? Where did it all start?
Oh God, how long have you got? It started probably when I was about 4 years old. I went to preschool. Place down the road from from our house, and in one of the rooms they had it was like a little back room that nobody else ever went to. They had an old upright piano, and it fascinated me. I think that was the first time I'd ever come across a piano, and so while any occasion I could get, and I remember this so clearly. I was only 4, but I could describe everything about that house. I would just go and run off into this room and just play this piano and just making up tunes. And my mum eventually noticed my interest in the piano and said, right, you're going to have lessons, which didn't happen until I was about 6. And I went and had lessons. I found lessons to be a horrifying experience because of the teacher. Shall I spare her on well, it doesn't matter.
I could go for it.
Yes.
Edit!
Pamela Richards.
Ooh.
Pamela Richards, if I could find your grave, I would dance on it now. She was a harridan, awful woman. I used to make up all sorts of excuses for not going to piano lessons, like I feel sick, I've got a headache, I've got my mum would always spot when I was fibbing, but basically she was a horror. I would because I was more interested in making music up rather than anything else. So without the benefit of ever having seen music, let alone read it, I was making up my own tunes, and that was what I spent most of my time in between lessons doing, which meant that I didn't properly learn the set pieces, which are all terribly simple, like sort of just preliminary grade stuff. But I was never any better from one week to the next, and so her solution was to rap me on the knuckles, literally with a ruler. And then she would, as a punishment, what she thought was a punishment, she would give me music theory tests to do.
Nice.
With no prior education in this for me, she would just put these papers, very simple ones to start with. She'd just say, right, as a punishment, we're not going to do any playing, you must do this paper. And she'd slap it on the piano, and she'd disappear off to watch telly for half an hour. And she'd come back, and pick up the thing, expected to find a baffled face with tears and an empty pages, all filled in. And not just all filled in, but all filled in correctly. And she began, right, okay, so next following week, same thing would happen, a more difficult one. And to the point where she was giving me, bearing in mind I'm still only 6 years old, so she was giving me grade 5 theory things, and I'd just be going, bing, 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 bing. And rather than say, this is absolutely incredible, how did you learn to do this? It was a bit like learning to read. I never recall ever learning to read. I could always do it, like my very first day at junior in primary school, junior, that's American, isn't it? Primary school, none of the other kids in the class could read, I could. I don't ever remember learning how to do it. For some reason I could do these theory papers, and yet the thing, despite all that, the one skill that's always eluded me, and I blame Pamela Lyrics entirely for this, is how to sight read. If you put music in front of me, I know what it's trying to tell me, it means nothing. It's just suddenly, it's bleh. Things, stuff on paper, it's meant to be music. Other people look at that and they'll hear something in their head. Like, you look at words on a page and you hear the words in your head. It would be a wonderful skill to do that, but I've never been able to do it, and I still can't. So that hindered my learning considerably. So by the time other kids had, hit grade 8 and beyond, I was still struggling on grade 4. But at that point I got bored with the piano and decided that an organ was much more interesting, because notes kept going for as long as you held them down. That was brilliant. So, and lots of different noises they made. So it was cathedral organ I did grade 4 on. But then grade 5 just became a little bit too difficult, because the sight reading was beyond me, because particularly on organ you've got 3 staves to read, not just 1 or 2 but 3. I couldn't do that. It was just and up to that point I passed all my exams, music exams, but it was only because I learned pieces by ear. It was the only way I could learn them. So I passed all the playing the set pieces was fine. When it came to the sight reading part of the exam, and it was a huge embarrassment, particularly on the Portsmouth Cathedral organ, where you're asked to sight read, and it's loud. You're playing this sodding great big cathedral organ, and you'll get 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D, G, E, no. It's just an embarrassment.
That's happened up. You're bigger than I am now.
Yeah, well, I remember at one point the verger actually came out and said, who's doing this? And I said, it's me, doing my sight reading. Could you stop, please? Could you not do that anymore? So I kind of, at that point I stopped any formal training, and that was also about the point when I was 17, when pop music became an interest, because up to then there was a hole in my sort of musical appreciation for, as far as modern music was concerned. All through the 60s, I loved pop music and stuff like that. So the Tornadoes were my favourite ever group, and the Shadows weren't bad either. In fact, one of my first recollections in that preschool was listening to Apache on the dance set. They had a dance set and playing Apache over and over and over and over again. When I was doing the sort of kind of early to mid-teens, it was all classical stuff, basically, just for the piano and organ lessons. But then I suddenly got interested in pop and rock music. I remember going to a party, and somebody put on The Man Who Sold the World. David Bowie, obviously. And it had just come out at that point, and I was transfixed. I just sort of went, this is absolutely brilliant, what is this? And David Bowie, I'm going out tomorrow to buy it, so I did. And that's when my interest in rock music started. Almost at the same moment, joined my first school band. Had at home I'd got a Hammond L100, organ. But I managed to persuade my parents to sell it and buy me a Wilson President because it was portable. You know, you couldn't carry a Hammondale 100 around. But
You could, but with difficulty.
Yeah. But a Wilson President, yes, it just had its own chrome legs, and you just sort of clipped the lid on, unscrewed the legs, and whacked it in the back of the minivan, and off you went. And I think the interest in synthesizers happened kind of in a long, smooth arc, but was eventually fired fully by, funnily enough, I think the thing that fired it off was the radiophonic workshop music that was frequently played during the daytime. Schools programs were more often than not, the themes were done by the radiophonic workshop, and they were either early synth stuff, quite often music concrete, like chopping up tape and splicing it together and making interesting tunes and noises. Obviously things like the Doctor Who theme, which obviously goes back in the early 60s with the lovely Delia, who came up with that. I basically sourced a whole load of records I found, and some of those radiophonic things were available on record to buy, and I still have those records. Then I just went out and looked for other stuff. There was the Gershon and Kingsley records, and then of course Walter Carlos did Switched on Bach, and that just got me going completely. It was like, this is what I want to do. Then of course the discovery of Switched on Bach was followed by the discovery of Yes and Genesis, and all the lovely keyboard instruments that they had, the synths and mini moogs and mellotrons and Hammonds and all of this stuff. So that really formed. It's just a kind of long, slow curve from very fumbling, sort of formal beginnings to being self-taught largely for the rest of it.
Okay.
So very long-winded answer.
And a good answer.
I don't know how you would quite paraphrase that.
That's not his job, that's my job.
Yeah.
So we've looked at where it's all started, and so from the sort of the keyboard elements, I believe you're involved with a band called the Enid.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe you could like to tell, because that's a few moons ago. So maybe you could tell us about how where you were with that and what you were using at the time, etc.
Yes, that was. Oh God! I was trying to think.
70s.
Oh, I can tell you the exact dates. It was the 20th of May till the 5th of November,
Right.
1976.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Dates forever etched in my memory.
Yeah.
But that came as a result of me seeing an advert that they had put in a Melody Maker.
Right.
Which, what was the other way around? Yes, it was their advert. Yes, it wasn't my advert. It was theirs. I was just basically floundering at home, on the dole, and having just left. I kind of voluntarily left art college early, 2 years into a 3-year course, because my original plan had been I was going to be Aardman Animations. I was going to be Nick Park. Somebody else turned out to be him, and funnily enough, he worked for Aardman as well, and got very rich with his wonderful creations. But that's what I wanted to do originally. I wanted to do film animation. Nice. And the art college I went to at Portsmouth claimed to do that as a course.
Right.
They didn't, as it turned out. When I saw the animation room when I went to look at the college, and my first day there, I went back to visit the animation room, and it was gone. Well, the room wasn't gone; it was just empty. And apparently, in between, they'd stopped doing the course and hadn't bothered to inform me.
Very kind of them.
So I opted to do a graphics course instead, and found it extremely boring and not really what I wanted to do. Yeah. And basically spent my entire art college life doing music. I was in about 3 bands at the same time. only ever went into college to have lunch.
Makes good sense.
Came back home to play and practice again.
Yeah.
Yes, after 2 years I left it. But I was on the dole, struggling, suddenly thinking actually really music is what I should be doing. And was reading Melody Maker, saw this advert, can't remember the wording of it at all now, but it sounded intriguing, so I got in touch and got asked along to do an audition, and that's what happened. I joined them.
So can you remember what you were using at the time back then?
Yeah, back then I had did I have the Rhodes or the RMI? I certainly had a clavinet. I had the clavinet, I had the Vox string thing, I had a Mini Korg 700S synth, and I'm pretty sure it was the RMI that I had, not... No, it can't have been. It must have been the Rhodes. I think I got rid of my first RMI then. So yes, it was those 4 keyboards.
Yes.
It's funny, there's a funny hole in my memory. I just, whether it's Rhodes or RMI, I'm pretty sure it was the Rhodes. Pretty sure. Anyway, so that's what I had then, and that got incorporated in their setup.
Right, brilliant.
Which was essentially it was a Hammond. I think that was an L100 as well. But we did have a Leslie for it, which was nice.
Okay. Yeah.
Robert used to get cross sometimes when I would crank up the preamp and make it distort because in the Enid the Hammond sounds were always very clean. But I used to like to crank the preamp up so it growled and it was stop.
Some things haven't changed.
Bit of effects there then.
They had Selena, 2 ARP Odysseys as far as I remember.
Right.
I'm misremembering that. I think it was 2 ARP Odysseys, yes. It was one to do tinkly things and one to do brassy things. A Pro Soloist, a Mini Moog. And that was essentially, I think that was the stuff they had, so it was incorporated with mine.
Well, I've just recently got a Pro Soloist myself, so I'm just learning my way through it now. So yes, a nice little bit of kit that is.
Is it an original or a DGX?
It's an original. It is an original.
It sounded better than DGX, or it sounded a bit kind of. Well, I thought it sounded a bit kind of digital.
No, it just needs a little bit of TLC in it. So that's one of my next projects. Have it sort of cleaned up and get everything clean on it, and I'm sure everything works. The aftertouch works, etc. Which was apparently one of the things I was told to look for, to make sure that when you go for it, make sure the aftertouch is okay.
Yeah.
And it seems to work well. So, but I've got that for other reasons, particularly sort of Genesis type stuff, and 1 or 2 of the tracks that I'm certainly trying to get a grip of. So, Entangled being one of them. So, but anyway, Mr. Hackett came along, apparently, and so I say my sort of what I can find is the early days of involvement was around the Spectral Mornings era. So how did it come along that you joined with Steve?
Well, okay. In between the Enid and Steve was a band that was, I think, very, very formative for me, which was Autumn.
Right.
We must mention Autumn because that was a really fruitful sort of musical partnership. Particularly with the guitarist Mark, who happens to be my oldest friend. We've known each other since we were 4. But we kind of worked very well with that. It was very symphonic and obviously very, at that moment in time, very, very influenced. All very kind of, sort of soaring instrumental stuff. No vocals at all. That was going quite nicely. We didn't do an awful lot of gigs, but we did do some. But we was all on the dole pretty much, and 3 of us were living together in the same house. Literally a 2 up, 2 down. Half the size of this house. 3 of us living in it. I mean, it's just really it's horrendous. But great fun. I mean, at the time you don't. When you're that age, you don't care. It's all just part and parcel of following your dream, really. But the dream was going a bit kind of sour simply because we were finding it very hard to get any gigs. We hit upon the bright idea of putting an advert in. I don't know if it still exists. It may well still do, but there was a magazine sent around all the colleges and universities called Circuit Magazine, which was literally a booking magazine.
Still exists.
So the social
Still
it does.
exists.
Yeah. So
Still
the social
exists.
secretaries could book bands to appear at college functions and do's and parties and things. And everybody was in this. Even Yes and Genesis were in it. And I might be misremembering this. I've quoted this before, and I'm probably completely misremembering it. But I seem to recall that Genesis went out with something ridiculous like £2,000. It can't be right. That can't be right.
Not at that time. No, definitely
it
not.
Cannot be right.
Take a note off it. You might be closer.
Yeah. Well, even 20,000.
No, not that. No way.
Not even 200, probably.
That's what I mean. Take a note off the 2000s, and you're probably right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But everyone was in it.
Yeah.
We thought, we'll stick an advert in. So we did a nice little graphic. I did a little cartoon and everything. And stuck it in. We thought, well, let's put it in for a month, basically, because the magazine was monthly. So we just put it in for a trial month and see what happens. Exactly at the moment our advert appeared, because we got the proof copy through the post, our phone got cut off. Because we couldn't pay the bill. I mean, basically, we hadn't paid the bill. They cut the phone off. So if
bastards,
we never found out. We never found out whether anybody had tried to call us to book us. If they did, they certainly couldn't have got hold of us. So, so that was a complete waste of effort. I think we were all thoroughly depressed at that point, and I mean, this was kind of like mid 1978. We're all a bit disappointed, depressed, and so we basically said, look, we'll still carry on doing this. We still want to carry on doing this, but it might be an idea if we everybody thought it was said it was okay for us to look for other things to do, because it's not going so well at the moment. So we did, and so I was looking through Melody Maker. I went through numerous auditions with some bands who, including people who've subsequently gone on, continued in the music business. Others who were never heard of again. I didn't really feel an affinity with any of the things I went to audition for. Have to say at this point, I passed all the auditions except one.
And who was that for?
That was for a band called Romance, and the kind of centrepiece of Romance was a drummer called Mark Ibbotson, who used to be the drummer in England before Jode Lee. We didn't get on. Let's put it that way. We just didn't. We didn't get on.
By all accounts, a lot of people didn't get on with him, so you're not alone.
I thought he was an arrogant beep. I spelled that. I can't.
Edit.
I can't get on with people. Anyway, you have to edit all this out. He's going to edit all this out.
Brilliant.
No, he's
Aren't you,
not.
Alan?
No, he's not.
Oh, yes, you are.
He's behind you.
Anyway, so my answering ads didn't work, but I saw. I decided to place one myself. And it gets to the point where it's all very well documented by now, I think. Citizen. But basically, the first ad that went in, the phone number was misprinted.
Right.
So I called Melody Maker and complained, and they said, "Oh, sorry, we'll put it in again in 2 weeks' time with the with the correction," which they did, and it was the subsequent reprint is the one that well, I say Steve saw. He'd asked Jed, his guitar player, he'd asked Jed to scour the adverts for anything that looked promising, and Jed went to him with this one, with my ad. Had they got it right the first time, I wouldn't have put it in again, obviously, so soon. and it would never have been seen. So,
Right. Oh, well. So,
talk about fate.
so you're there now. You're working with Steve, and obviously Spectral Mornings was the first album I think you were involved with. So maybe you could tell us about the album and how you were involved with that production, the equipment you used, etc., and how it all came together.
Oh gosh, that's a very broad. That's a very broad question. It's not an easy one to answer in several sentences, really.
Try several paragraphs then.
Yeah, several paragraphs. Well, that was the reason Steve was looking for a band, because he basically wanted to go out live. It's his first kind of first outing as a live solo act. Obviously, he'd done 2 solo albums before that, but he was still in Genesis, or I don't know, he just freshly left at the time. Well, he certainly was still in Genesis with Acolyte, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Police and Touch? Just left by then. Just left, yeah. But it's still, I suppose, a bit too soon to go out live at that point. But now he obviously started writing the music for Spectral and was looking for a band. And so the live gigs that we did at the end of 1978 obviously got that ball rolling.
Yeah.
We played mostly Acolyte and Police Don't Touch material, and whatever there was of Spectral Mornings at that time, because some of Spectral kind of came together in the studio.
Right. Okay.
Most of it came together in the rehearsal room, but there's still bits, tracks like Red Clara Tai Chi, for example, didn't really come together until the studio. Yeah. It was Steve had a koto and basically was experimenting with that, so that kind of grew.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt this one thing, what exactly is a koto? Is it a stringed instrument?
Yes, a koto, it looks like, if you imagine a little rowing boat turned upside down, yes.
Okay.
With a sound hole on it and strings stretched across it,
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Okay. Yeah. It's okay. Carry on.
Well, obviously there's the title track of the album, and a man that's just about to walk out of the door at this moment in time.
What's that?
Is one of his favourites tracks of all time, I believe.
What, Spectral Mornings?
Spectral Mornings.
Basically, every time I hear that track, I cry my eyes out.
So while he's going out of the room...
So you talk about it while I'm not
we'll
here.
talk about what he's not here. Tell us about Spectral Mornings, the actual track itself, what you were involved in that, and the keyboards, and sort of how you went to the production of that particular track. Because I know Alan's going to love that one.
Well, one thing about pretty much, all the pre-existing music on Spectral, the album, that we'd rehearsed up before we went into the studio. The thing with that is that it was... it doesn't happen much these days where music is written to be performed live first. Usually it's recorded first, and then you have to work out a way of doing it live afterwards. Certainly back then, in the days of tape and no computers and no sequences and none of that stuff. You had to be, you had to be able to play it live anyway. So rehearsing it, with a band in real time, basically informed how it was going to be recorded.
Right.
So really the answer to that was that all came together in the rehearsal room rather than in the studio.
Yes.
So the bulk of it. So we knew beforehand what instruments we were going to form the essential backbone of it.
Yeah.
The other details were kind of icing on the cake. But,
so I mean,
Spectral was pretty much fully formed live.
Right. Okay.
There was nothing. I don't think there's anything, even in by way of overdubs afterwards. I don't think there's really anything on there that wasn't there in the live performance as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So equipment that you're using then. I mean, I've got what I think is a list of things, but can you remember what you were using at the time on that album?
Yes, pretty much. I had. It's blank. It's blank. Fender Rhodes piano.
Yeah.
My original old Stage 73, which dated back. Oh, when did I get that? I must have bought that in about 1975, 76.
Yeah.
So it's a very old. It's one of the earlier models of Rhodes, and in just by far and away the best tone. All the pianos from that era.
Yeah.
It was when they, just a little technicality here, it was when they first replaced the original Rayback
Right.
Tines, were Rayback reeds really, with Torrington. Well, they weren't reeds, no, they were Tines, yeah.
Yeah.
Rayback, who made the reeds that go in Wurlitzer pianos, they also made the original Tines that went in Rhodes pianos.
Right.
But they were made by a centerless grinding process, which basically gave them no elastic outer skin, so they were quite dead.
Right.
They replaced those with swaged tines, which were made by a company called Torrington, which are made in the same way as sewing machine needles, so they're like bright and shiny, and they're very elastic, and so they're bright and have a much brighter, pingier tone and a much longer sustain.
Right.
And it's the first generation of those pianos that where mine came from. So,
Right.
and all of the ones from that era sound equally musical and lovely.
Yeah.
Never got on with the later models.
Right.
Anyway, that's a little aside. So it's the Rhodes piano, the clavinet, the box string thing, the mini Korg. So it was the Enid setup basically.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
so it would have been the Rhodes and the Enid. Of course it
Yes.
was. Yes, not the RMI. The RMI. Yes, I had the RMI as well. It was my second RMI because the first RMI was a 360. And it's basically a fairly restricted 60-note keyboard. The subsequent one I bought was a 368X, which had the tone control and the volume control on the panel. Had an extra 8 keys at the bottom, so it's a longer range. Gordon Reed still has that in a fly case somewhere. Whether it works or not, I don't know. The last time we opened up the fly case, probably about 15 years ago, it was full of mould. But it's probably. But the thing. But we plugged it in and it still worked. Amazingly. But it had a nice sort of it was RMI Alfungi basically.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you. You just given me the title of this interview. RMI Alfungi.
Yeah.
And what else did I have? This didn't finish yet. Roland SH2000.
Yeah.
The Roland RS202
Yes.
string machine.
Yeah.
And the Mellotron, Novotron, and that was it. That was
Right.
that was the lineup for Spectral.
Right. Okay.
And the first tour, the same
Yeah.
as the tour that we did just before it.
Brilliant. So, okay. So moving down the line then. So that's Spectral taken care of, and I think my album, which is the favourite one, my favourite track, certainly favourite album, sorry, is Defector, and one track in particular, which you're aware of.
Is it going to be slogans?
No.
No. Right. I thought you were going to say, what does the vocoder say at the end of slogans? That's usually the question.
Well, you can answer that if you want to.
No, let's do your first question first.
Oh,
Hammer in
come
the Sand. Hammer in the Sand. Yes. So tell me a little bit about Hammer in the Sand.
Hammer in the Sand. Had a very different life to begin with. Had a very different beginning. Its original beginnings were Steve had a song, quite a kind of skippy up-tempo song in 6/8, which, as far as I remember, I can't remember what the words were, but I seem to remember there was some kind of a nautical theme that they had. It was
Right.
I don't know what it was. It was fishing boats and fishermen, and I can't remember what was in there, but it was a slightly skippy nautical song, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
And there were obviously long periods in the days where somebody else was busy recording stuff in the control room, and you better entertained yourself. You went and played on the Space Invaders machine, or whatever. You just sort of hung around. You had to hang around in case you wanted. But on one such moment, I went into the big studio downstairs, and it was deserted, and there was a beautiful Bosendorfer piano sitting in the corner.
Right.
And so I thought, oh good, nobody's listening, I can just play unself-consciously, and found myself playing basically the chord sequence for this Skippy song on the Bosendorfer, but I just slowed it down and done basically and turned it into what is now the first half. That
Right.
first half of Hammer in the Sand. And
Which I've spent many moons trying to master.
but little did I know John Aycock was standing in the doorway listening. And of course, I would have, had I realised that, I would have frozen and just not been able to do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I get very self-conscious when I think people are listening. But he waited till I finished and he said, "That's really great, you should play that to Steve." And I went, "Oh, you heard me, you heard me, you heard me." He said, "Yeah, play it to Steve, play it to Steve." So he got Steve down and I played it to him and Steve said, "We're doing that. Let's do it like that."
Right.
So that's how that came about, really.
Brilliant.
And then he, you know, came up with the second half.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we sort of came up with that together as well.
Right.
But
So what is it in the second half? Is it in the strings part of that?
the strings and that was two things essentially. It was Mellotron, very undermixed. You'd hardly know it was there. Mellotron
Mm-hmm.
and Prophet 5.
Right.
But done line by line. Basically, I worked out the string part, scored it out on 4 lines, you know, as 4 parts, and we separately recorded the top
Yeah.
to the bottom as separate
Yeah.
takes, and tracked the same thing again with the Mellotron. As I said, the Mellotron is barely audible, but if you took it away, you'd notice it would just suddenly sound purely synthy. But it just gave the element of the air and the element of realism to it. So that's what the strings were. Then of course the second half just really hangs on Steve's guitar synth. So it's
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. So, taking that to the next stage, then, I mean, obviously you had to, there's a few times where I've seen the recordings of that track being played, for example. So how did you actually manage to go about recreating that particular Bosendorfer sound live?
we didn't.
You didn't?
We never did.
No.
No, at that time there wasn't the technology. There was no such thing. I mean, the nearest thing would have been a Yamaha CP70 or CP80,
So it was done elsewhere.
but it's
someone
just
else.
completely, would have been entirely the wrong sound, type of sound for Hammer.
Because I've searched a few times and I've only found a couple of examples of it being sort of recorded live anywhere. So I thought we'll ask that question.
Well, as far as I know, it would have been, Roger, certainly. I know Roger does it.
He does, yes.
Did Julie ever do it?
Don't
I
know.
don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No?
don't know.
No, I don't think. No.
Roger Singh does it. There's a 2004 version of Roger playing it,
Yeah.
and I think there's a I'm trying to think of the years now, 1990. There's a very early version, I think, of you doing something of what I found, but other than that, there's not a lot. There's very, very little of it, and you know. So
No, it wasn't played in the set
No.
until 2004.
Yeah.
Because I thought you had done it with Steve live, but obviously I was disabused of that notion by Steve when I asked him.
Yeah.
So the first time it was actually done live
We just couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
was with Roger in 2004.
Yeah. Oh well. Okay. So let's try and move.
See,
through some
told you
more
being an
questions.
anorak does pay off occasionally.
Go through some more questions. So we've got something around running. Okay, so the next albums then. So going through to Cured and Highly Strung. So Cured is the first album that I actually saw played live. The first time I saw Steve live was on that particular album. So what can you remember about the tour of that time? What were you using then, and how did you bring that all together?
Well, again, Cured was one that just kind of really came together in the studio mainly. Well, pretty much entirely, really. That's what my memory tells me. I don't recall playing any of the material live off Cured before it was recorded. In fact, I'm almost certain that we didn't. So it was basically Steve and I putting it together in the studio. Oh,
The only bit of Cured that was played in 1980, I think, was Cradle of Swans, or an extract from it.
right, in which case I wouldn't have had anything to do with
Exactly.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
you're quite right in terms of your
Yeah.
involvement, but once again, that little bit was. I'm trying to remember what it was. A segue
Yeah.
into something else.
Right.
I think it was actually Overnight Sleeper
Oh, could
segue,
well
but-
be. It could well be, yes.
into
Yeah,
Overnight.
yeah,
But otherwise, no, you'll carry on. You're perfectly correct.
Thank you. Thank you. I need this because my memory of dates and times is quite erroneous sometimes. Things shuffle around in time.
Exactly.
The
Happens
order
to all of us.
the order gets muddled. Where was I?
In the studio.
Yeah, in the
studio,
studio.
yes,
yeah,
yes.
in the studio. Well,
Put
a
it
lot
together.
of it. We did quite a lot of the putting together of the song. Writing everything in there. Mostly in a rehearsal room in Shepherd's Bush. I seem to remember. In Wood Lane, Wood Lane somewhere. There was a rehearsal room.
Yeah.
We spent a fair amount of time there. Then we went to the studio and put it together. I personally had loads of fun doing Cured because I got to do so much. Got to grab the reins. In particular, because that was when the dreaded Lindrum, which has now been accused of so much of having ruined that album by a lot of people. I don't agree.
No,
I don't
not
agree.
at all.
Yes, I think when you compare it to the overall sort of sound, texture and production of that album and compare it to what you can do now, yes, it does sound a bit flat and limp. But I think that what we tried to do was very brave.
Right.
As far as I knew at that point, the only other example of the Lindrum being used on anything that I'd heard of at that time was, again, this is all kind of apocryphal, is Steve Winwood was supposed to have used it on Ark of a Diver, and allegedly only for the hi-hats as well.
Right.
Why? I don't know, it all seems a bit spurious information and everything, and I would have thought that Stevie Wonder probably was the first person to actually use it in anger on a recording. But other than that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, so in the absence of any of those being true, then as far as I know, Cured was the first album I was aware of that used a Lindrum in its entirety to do the drums, apart from the cymbals, because it didn't have any cymbals in it. You had to do your cymbals overdubbed by hand afterwards.
Yeah.
But I loved doing that. I mean, it was full of frustration because the Lind kept on dropping its memory now and then. You get to the end of programming a track up, and it would suddenly go the dreaded 4 beeps. It would beep beep beep. That's 3. Beep 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 beep, and it would drop everything, and you have to start again, and just contain your temper and thin Lula, just calm, do it again. Because again, the only saving you had, or most devices at that time, you could save your memory by dumping to cassette tape, which is very unreliable. On many occasions it wouldn't load back in properly because you just hit dropouts on the tape just at the point you recorded the data. But anyway, usually the second attempt to do the programming was better than the first anyway, so that was fine. So yes, I really enjoyed that, and again the keyboard rig grew a little bit more. Yes. By that point I'd got the Roland vocoder, which I had for Defector anyway, and got the Roland vocoder for Defector. I did a Korg CX1 organ, Mini Moog, probably something else as well, but the rig was growing.
Where did the Jupiter 8 come along then?
Jupiter 8 was highly strung.
Right. Okay.
Highly strung was almost entirely Jupiter 8.
Right.
We'll get onto that in a minute if you want to, rather than jumping forward too much. But yes, I really enjoyed doing Cured. We did it at a studio which no longer exists today, Reed and Recorders, which is at the back corner of Whiteley's, in the end of a little mews of Whiteley's in Bayswater. Since demolished.
Tell me a little bit about the Mini Moog then, because that's a piece of kit that's always fascinated me. I always sort of looked and admired it, but tell me your perspective of being a user.
I had 3. I went through 3 of the things. The first one I bought from Andrew McCrory Shand, who who used to be in a band called Druid.
Right.
Do you remember Druid?
I do, yeah.
Yes.
I do.
Yes, they won the Battle of the Bands in 1973 probably, 4 maybe,
Got to be
74,
around. Got to be around.
something like that.
Yeah.
And I really liked Druid. I thought their album CC the Sun, I still have it, and it's still nice.
Yeah.
But Andrew subsequently has found fame and great deals of fortune as the composer of all the Teletubbies music. But I bought my first Mini Moog. I bought off him.
Yeah.
And it was one of the original ones with the frosted plastic pitch and mod wheels.
Yes.
Yeah. Not the ridge. It didn't have the little ridges on it.
Right, okay.
On them. They were the smooth frosted plastic ones. But it also had terrible stability problems, drift problems. It sounded beautiful. It's absolutely. I mean, it's a classic example of if you compare an old model of something with allegedly improved newer models, there is a distinct difference in the tone.
Yeah.
I mean, you really could tell it with those between that one and my third Mini Moog.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was so drifty that it was a real problem live, and I realised I had to replace it. So I sold it and thought, what was then the current model,
Right.
which was nice. There's some kind of liquid quality missing that the old one had.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can describe it. It just sounded like liquid when you're playing it. The old one.
Yeah.
The other one sounded, undeniably like a Mini Moog, but it was okay. I was fine. I didn't love it in the same way. It got stolen from a rehearsal room up in Canonbury, yes, where we used to rehearse.
Yeah.
Somebody broke in one day. They make all sorts of things. They nicked Dick's bass pedals. I think a couple of guitars went, but it was it was that Mini Moog which it was the only keyboard that they took.
Yeah.
But I was a bit pissed off. So I had to get another one. Fortunately, it was insured, so insurance money paid for a number 3, which I no longer have it anymore.
Nice. No. Okay.
What was the original question?
Well, we've looked at Cured and what was going on at that time, so then we went to Highly Strung, and obviously you mentioned about the introduction of the Jupiter 8.
Yes, the Jupiter 8. It was a real passionate love affair I had with that synth.
Keep it clean, please. It's Family Magazine.
It's really, if I ever had a love affair with a keyboard instrument, it was that one. If I had it now, I would still be using it. That's another story about
that one.
But no, the Jupiter was gorgeous. I couldn't believe anything could have so many guises. People would. What was quite sort of popular or commonly kind of touted, an opinion that people had those days was the difference between Japanese synths and American synths, and basically it was like American synths are warm and organic and everything. Japanese synths are cold and digital and I never found that of the Jupiter 8. Never. No. To me it seemed to be able to do all of those things. It's whereas the American synths, to me, I think what it was for me, the American synths were only fat and warm. They couldn't be anything else.
Right. Yeah.
The Japanese synths could be whatever you wanted. They could be fat and warm, and they could be cold and digital and clinical if you wanted. You could make them, even though it's a completely analog machine. Digital you put in quotation marks.
Yeah.
It just make any sound that came to mind. So
to get one these days now, the cost of those things has just gone through the roof.
Oh well, even when I got it at the time, it shows you the difference in the price of things
Mm.
now, because I got that in, what year was that? Would have been 1983, 82, 83, I got that. At the time it was